Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know you're all so happy to see each other. This has been feels like a love fest for 2 days now. And I know I said yesterday that I've hugged more people in 2 days than I have for 18 months, but I shouldn't really announce that, so nobody else will hug me. But welcome to this Nordisk Panorama Town Hall session. My name is Anita, I'm the festival director, and it's wonderful to see so many of you, clearly more than we had expected. I'm sorry about that, chair-wise. And we also have people with us online, so welcome to them as well. So we are excited to relaunch the town hall at Nordisk Panorama. We wanted to create a space where you, the documentary community, could gather and discuss important challenges and opportunities within the industry. And so this is your room. We want to hear from all of you. And we are doing this in a strong collaboration with the Nordisk Film TV Fond. And therefore I will hurry on and give the word to Carolina Ledin, who will moderate this session for us today. So Carolina, over to you, and welcome.
Ooh, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I can't express how thrilled I am to be with you all in this real space, my Nordic tribe, and even beyond that. Ooh, but it's also really feels new, and I'm really a bit nervous, but we're among friends, right? So let's all support each other here. Whoops. But we are very happy to be launching this Tall Hound initiative with Nordisk Panorama, and especially pleased that Nordisk Panorama already has said that they are going to make this into not just a one-time thing, but an annual get-together where we can take stock of where we are right now as a documentary community. So Anita, you took it and ran with it, so good for you. 2021 has been designated Documentary Year at Nordisk Film TV Fond, which has meant that not only have we increased our documentary funding by 20%, we've also had a string of activities throughout the year. We launched a report that Jan Do, who's among us here, undertook for us, tracking the distribution of 5 years' worth of documentaries supported by the fund. We launched it at CPH Docs with a mini session where we brought together different stakeholders, Signe Bjør Sørensen, Christian Falk, Axel Arne, Ulla Simonen, who briefly but very precisely pinpointed what are the issues we need to address right now together. And we also had 4 follow-up interviews with them, and if you haven't read them yet, I urge you to take a look at that. Because today we want to pass the baton, as it were, to more voices and to 3 speakers who will share concrete experience. And to you, dear colleagues who are filling the room, so glad to see so many of you, how can we move forward and maintain and nourish and further develop what I like to call the magic triangle? Independent creators, films and funds, institutes, and of course, the broadcasters. How do we support each other in these radically changing times for our industry? And this is how we will proceed. After being kicked off by our keynote speaker, we will delve into the realities of financing and distribution through 2 case studies under the heading, How We Work, Financing and Production, and Where is the Audience, Distribution. And after each case, we'll have time to open the floor where I will bring in the stakeholders who have collaborated around these particular projects, but also to share your experiences. What do you recognize? What do you not recognize? How is it different from your reality? And how can we change the things that really matter? And one last thing I want to highlight before inviting our first speaker is that this session is also part of another initiative of Nordisk Film TV Fond, 6 sessions under the heading Audiovisual Collaborations. The first one was in Gothenburg. The last one will be next week at Finnish Film Affair. And they have grasped issues as financing and distribution, but also diversity and sustainability, but all with the common theme of collaboration. Today, days before Nordisk the day before, actually, Nordisk Forum kicks off, I think it's the perfect time to remind ourselves that we are all in this together. And so how do we strengthen collaborations to make real change? That is the questions. You are the only ones who have the answers. That was my bit. So now it's time to kick off this inaugural town hall. And we are incredibly fortunate to have Simon Kilmurry, who many of you know as, up till very recently, the head of IDA, International Documentary Association, and before that, in charge of POV, the high-end documentary strand on US public broadcasting. Among the many outstanding films you commissioned, Simon, I just need to highlight that you took a chance on Steam of Life, and it became such a surprise finish hit for the US audiences. Good for you. And that's one of many Nordic films that you have given the spotlight. Yeah, a round of applause. Originally from Scotland, which, according to us, you're basically Nordic. So, so you are both far away and so close. So welcome, Simon. Thank you so much. Please kick us off.
Thank you, Carolina. And I want to thank Anita and the whole Nordisk Panorama team for bringing us together. This feels so good to be here. And I'm intimidated. It almost feels like going back to school after an extra long summer holiday, and you don't know if your friends will still like you or if they'll remember your name, or so bear with me. When I was invited to speak today, as Carolina said, I was asked to think about the challenges and opportunities that I see in the field, and that seemed like a fairly straightforward assignment, so I said yes, and then I really started to think about it and realized it's actually not such a straightforward assignment. Carolina gave a little kind of précis of my background, and yes, I grew up in Scotland, but I've lived in the US for over 30 years, and but I still feel like I've got a foot in both places. I still feel Scottish, even though I've lived there for the majority of my life. I didn't study filmmaking. So for all of you who are deep into this world, I always feel like a little inadequate in front of you. But I fell in love with documentaries because I was engaged and transported by the stories that they told me, by the places they took me. And yes, as a commissioning editor in the US, it was a great privilege to showcase so many films from around the world for US audiences. And it was always my goal at POV was to have a really good representation of non-English speaking films. That's also one reason why PBS didn't like me very much, I think, but that's another story. And at IDA, it was also a great opportunity to continue that work as an advocate for filmmakers. My work at IDA and POV has been undergirded with my own personal belief that documentaries at their best are not just a product or content. I believe that documentaries, in addition to being a form of creative expression and exploration, that they have a social and democratic function. That they can entertain, but they can also uplift. They expose and they hold the powerful to account. Now, let's be honest, this business has never been easy, ever, as far as I remember. There's always been challenges around funding, around distribution, and reaching audiences, and these are issues which I think will always be with us, but at the moment I see some particular challenges that have emerged over the past few years. Now this year and a half obviously has been exceptionally challenging for all of us, and we're still enduring a global pandemic, and that has exacerbated and highlighted already existing social inequities. And in the US, in the wake of the George Floyd murder in spring of 2019 and too many others, we've also seen this extraordinary explosion of social movements calling for racial justice, not only in the United States, but also in the United Kingdom and other countries around the world. Now, it's a cliche that too often goes quietly accepted as true that we're living in the golden age of documentaries. After all, with Netflix and Apple and Amazon, we seem to have more outlets and more money than ever before. We're seeing corporations invest in documentaries, albeit in attempts to burnish their brands. And everyone says they go to Sundance to see the documentaries because they're the best films there and they're cool. And generally, they are the best films there. But I would argue that rather than living in the golden age of documentary film, we're living in the corporate age of documentary film. And the documentary world is shifting from one that had a social and creative and democratic function at its core to one that's market-based. And that, I think, threatens the future of the field. This corporate age, which Sheila Nevins calls a murder and true crime boom, is driven by the bottom line and privileges genres such as true crime and celebrity-focused films, and it also privileges those filmmakers who have the longest track record. The imbalances in the field risks leading to a homogenization of filmmaking language, and it risks further marginalizing those filmmakers who do not have access to those with power and resources, and driving those filmmakers out of the field. Any field that adheres too closely to a purely capitalist system will eventually only support those films that reach the broadest possible audience and cater to the lowest common denominator. Those films will become product or content, judged not on their impact or artistry or vision or social concerns, but solely on the profits they deliver to networks and investors. And that will further marginalize those on the fringes who tell artistic stories, bring fresh perspectives, deal with uncomfortable issues, or who come from unexpected places. Despite the illusion of an influx of money into our field, many filmmakers are having a hard time just making ends meet. Now, I recognize that these stats that I'm going to cite are primarily US, but I think it's probably not too different in other places. So a recent study that IDA published, we commissioned it while I was still there, and it was published this summer, shows that a full 75% of filmmakers must do work outside of filmmaking just to make a living. 74% of filmmakers reported that they have been negatively impacted by the pandemic. Of that group, filmmakers of color and female filmmakers were the most economically disadvantaged in terms of film income, revenue, and access to the bigger money that streaming networks can offer. And I think it's a pretty staggering thought that in this so-called golden age, 3/4 of filmmakers are just struggling to pay the bills. And just as society is going through a reckoning on race, we're seeing how that reflects within our documentary community. In the US, we've seen questions around authorship grow more pronounced. Filmmakers and communities have begun to question a system that's favored white filmmakers over filmmakers of color, and the data backs this up. And they've been asking who's the right to tell their stories. I recognize that when this question comes up of who gets to tell the story, there can be a fear of censorship, and I totally understand that. But I want you to resist that reaction. Just set it aside for a moment. No one is saying you can't tell the story of another community as an outsider, and you can't tell that story very, very well indeed. But it is reasonable to ask about the ethics of authorship, of power and position, to examine one's motivations, particularly when one's telling the stories of communities that have been systematically marginalized. At the same time, questions around diversity should not be reduced to checking a box on a funding application. It's much too complicated for that. Now, I know that all sounds a bit bleak, but I'm Scottish, and it's just, well, that's the way we are. It rains there. But I do have hope, I really do. And I think that collectively there is power to make change and to build a stronger, more equitable ecosystem. And I have a couple examples of perhaps how we can think about how we can do that. First, I want to talk about the power that we have when we join together and work in coalition. And I know that probably sounds simplistic and Pollyannish, but I have a couple of examples. So in 2018, IDA's Getting Real conference, there was a whole slate of sessions organized under the banner Decolonize Docs. These were organized by loosely formed coalitions of filmmakers that we gave the space to at the conference. Groups like Brown Girls Doc Mafia, the Asian Documentary Filmmakers Alliance, Filmmakers with Disabilities, amongst others. And they were asking these questions about authorship and identity. They were asking who gets to tell the story, from what point of view, who gets the funding, who gets to greenlight it, who gets to be at the table when those decisions are made. but not too many people were listening back in 2018. Fast forward to September 2020, our last Getting Real conference, and my last one there. And these questions had moved from the margins to the center. What started as loose coalitions of filmmakers had evolved into groups that are now beginning to exert some measure of power and influence, not only on commercial outlets, but on our public broadcaster and on funders, pushing for transparency, pushing for accountability within the systems that support our field. Earlier this year, for example, they challenged PBS in the United States about how funding and broadcast hours are concentrated in the hands of just a few filmmakers, the favored ones. And now conversations are actively ongoing with PBS to push it to live up to its mission, work with a wider range of filmmakers. And PBS has made that commitment to review and diversify its funding, and it's actively allocating new resources, not taking resources from one place and putting them somewhere else, new resources in response to this pressure. Another example is the Documentary Producers Alliance. They came together because they felt that the Producers Guild of America was really not representing documentary filmmakers very well at all, and it wasn't. It still isn't. So they formed to create more equitable relationships between filmmakers and investors around profit sharing and crediting. The guidelines that they promulgated have now become standard industry practice in the United States, and that's actually helping to rebalance the power dynamics which beforehand were heavily weighted in favor of investors at the expense of filmmakers. So rather than just complain about the broken system, which we all love to do, I do it myself, they've been working together to put forward concrete solutions and holding those in power to account, just like we do in our films. None of these changes happened overnight, and change rarely happens overnight. But because these filmmakers came together and were patient and didn't stop asking the questions, we are beginning to see some change. Now, I want to return to this thorny question of authorship and diversity in our field. Documentary has roots, as we all know, in a colonial practice, where the gaze of the privileged filmmaker told the stories of the other. Just look at the work of Robert Flaherty. Again, I'm not suggesting that you don't have the right to tell any story that you want to, but I do think our filmmaking will be better, and we have an ethical duty to ask ourselves a set of questions. Why am I the right person to tell this story? What impact will this story have in this community when I leave? What are my motivations, connections to this community? Do I have people on my team whose experience, perspective, background is different from mine that will challenge me? I think if you can answer these honestly, you can answer these questions yes, then you'll end up with a richer, more complex, nuanced, honest, artful films. If you can't say yes, then perhaps that's a chance to reimagine your approach. So I take these conversations around authorship not as an obstacle, not as people saying no to you making the films you want to make, but as an opportunity to hold ourselves accountable to make the very best work that we possibly can. And for those of us, all of you in positions to hire people, for crews, for other jobs, we need to make sure that we're making space for new voices, that we're hiring people in positions of authority, new people who are bringing new people to the table to make decisions. Let's not just default to always just hiring the people we know or that look like us. With each film that you make, you've got the opportunity to support new diverse talent in the field. And when we do that, I think we'll build a stronger, more diverse and vibrant and more sustainable field. We also need to recognize the value of strong, non-commercial institutions as a key part of our documentary infrastructure. We need to recognize that we cannot rely on the unregulated commercial market that's purely profit-driven. Now, there's some exceptionally good work that's been made by the Netflixes of the world, but our interests and goals don't always align. The decision by the Nordic Council of Ministers to cut funding for Nordisk Panorama is incredibly distressing and it's an alarm bell, and we can't ignore it. It's a death by 1,000 cuts moment. This is the first cut. It'll be fine. We'll survive. There'll be another one. It'll be fine. We'll survive. Suddenly, it'll be gone. And it's up to all of us to make sure that doesn't happen. And we also need a strong public media system in each country that is bold and mission-focused and understands that it doesn't have the resources to compete with the Netflixes, the Amazon of the world, so it has to have a different strategy. And that's a public service mission, and that's its value. I'm working with these institutions working together. I actually have hope for a really vibrant system. Remember, you actually have power. People need your stories, and in that need, you have an ability to make change not only with the stories you're telling, but within the systems that support them. So let's use what we've learned over the past year and not forget that we have that power to make some change. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon. Marvelous. Frank, insightful, provocative, just what we need, but also inspirational examples. So let's keep Simon's wise words and food for thought in mind as we press on and when we discuss later. Because now we'll go over to our first case under the heading How We Work. And to present the case, I invite Danish-Swedish producer at Malmö-based Otto Images, Ulrich Høj Jensen, to approach the stage. But hey, wait a minute, I want to introduce you first. To me, Otto Images is the perfect example of think global, act local, or rather the other way around. Telling very local stories with very international appeal. And this global, local perspective is also very present in Ove's additional work as workshop mentor and moderator all over Europe. So now we look forward to a peek into the financing and production realities of Nelly and Nadine, pitched here at Nordisk Panorama Forum and now in its final stages of production. One thing I want to mention is our distribution report that I mentioned earlier clearly demonstrated, surprise, that it hasn't gotten any easier to finance and produce high-end creative documentaries, even in the Nordics. The pandemic in many ways magnified this situation, and Nelly and Nadine found itself mitt i smeten, as we say in Swedish, which means in the middle of the batter, literally. So Ove, please tell us all about it. Now you can clap for Ove.
Thank you very much, Carolina. You're absolutely right. Nelly and Nadine got caught right in the middle of the pandemic, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But as Carolina said, my name is Ove, and we're going to talk about a project called Nelly and Nadine. And my idea is actually a little bit in this spirit of this town hall to use this case study to raise a number of questions that I'm very curious to hear also your feedback to. Because we have some things that we have experienced with Nelly and Nadine, and just spending a little more than 24 hours now here at Nordisk Panorama, I can see that some of the experiences that we have are very similar to some of the experiences that other producers and filmmakers have had with their productions. So I'll raise a couple of questions that I'm very interested in discussing with you, and also not only in terms of directors and producers, but also film funds and broadcasters, to see how do we actually confront some of these issues that we have been experiencing. So we will talk about Nelly and Nadine, and just to give you a little flavor for the film and what it actually is, we'll show a little pilot that we also used when we pitched it here 2 years ago, just to give you an introduction. Before we show the pilot, I just want to say that Nelly and Nadine is the very unlikely love story about two women who fell in love on Christmas Eve, 1944, in the Ravensbrück concentration camp. They met on that evening and later on decided actually to spend the rest of their life together. for various reasons, it ended up being almost like a family trauma that this lesbian love story could never be told inside the family. So what happened now is that the third generation, the grandchild of Nelly, is now rediscovering the story that was never told inside the family. So you will meet in this pilot Nelly, who is the grandchild of, you will meet Sylvie, who is the grandchild of Nelly. So let's see the pilot.
J'ai toujours entendu chanter ma grand-mère, évidemment à la maison, à chaque Noël elle chantait. Tous les ans jusqu'à sa mort, jusqu'au dernier Noël. Et Nadine, pour moi, c'était la compagne de ma grand-mère, mais je voyais rien de... Je voyais pas une histoire d'amour. Je savais ce qui s'était passé dans les camps, mais on n'en parlait pas dans la famille.
Noël 44. Je suis allée chanter chez les Françaises. Puis une voix dans le brouhaha. Chantez-nous donc Butterfly. L'émotion coule dans ma peau. Je sens la chaleur de mes yeux entre mes paupières. Battement de main. 2 bras me serrent, 2 baisers sur ma joue. Butterfly est devant moi. Ses cheveux noirs, sa peau d'ivoire, ses yeux obliques. Mais Butterfly de Ravensbrück est chinoise et non pas japonaise.
Ce manuscrit, j'ai ouvert 3-4 fois depuis que ma mère est décédée. J'ai jamais réussi à aller plus loin que la page 4, je crois. Pourquoi Nelly a décidé de faire sa vie avec Nadine? Bon, Nadine, c'est quand même une femme assez mystérieuse. Pourquoi elle s'est retrouvée arrêtée par les Allemands et en camp de concentration? Pourquoi elles sont parties ensemble au Venezuela? Je suis sûre qu'elles ont voulu garder tout ça pour que nous, on le trouve. C'est le moment de tout trouver.
Pendant 2 mois, son esprit et sa tendresse devaient me faire oublier l'horreur du lieu où nous nous trouvions. Mais y aura-t-il jamais une vie pour nous?
So, the core of the production is, of course, director Magnus Gerden, based here in Malmö, Sylvie, living in a farm a little outside Paris, one co-production company in Norway, Up North Film, with Ingrid, and another co-producer in Belgium, because actually a lot of the story takes place in Brussels, where Nelly and Nadine lived after the war. So, this whole co-production setup is, of course, the way that we always have been working and used to working for a long time. But as I think many of us has experienced, what was a kind of co-production creative blessing very quickly became a cross-border burden, right? Because we had shot around 80% of the film when the whole pandemic hit. And what do you do then? How do you continue? How do you keep up the contact with your main character? These kind of very practical problems that I think a lot of you probably have experienced as well during this pandemic. But also more production aspects, of course. How do you keep up promises towards spendings in Belgium when all of a sudden you cannot fly in a crew and shoot in Belgium? And all these complications that really quickly made it a cross-border burden to actually complete and do this film. So that created a lot of troubles, of course, inside the production and completion of the film, and still actually have a couple of unresolved issues. And while talking to some of you here, I realized that's actually a situation, and many of us are here, because I realized we have a new guest among us, and I named that the COVID-19 ghost, because I think many of us still carries these invisible structures that we're trying to overcome. In this case, it's of course some of the creative aspects, it's also some of the production aspects, but I've also talked to a number of producers here having very, very different interpretations of this COVID-19 ghost, the influence that we maybe not see immediately, but that we're all carrying with us. I talked with a producer today who said, I had to put all my productions on hold. I don't know what my income will be next year because all the productions in development are now at stop. So I think, of course, up until now, we've found good solutions to deal with many of the COVID-19 situations, but I think it's definitely not over yet. We're still carrying these ghosts with us that is now the new guest at the table, and we have to, of course, find reasonable ways of dealing with that, whether it means that productions are at full stop, that you in a year don't have new productions to go further with because everything that you did in your development was actually put on hold. So I'm very curious when we open the discussion to hear about your COVID-19 ghosts. What are your strategies? How do you overcome them? How do you actually try to deal with them in terms of creative flow, creative aspect, but also in terms of course, the cash flow, the production aspects of projects. Another thing that I think we all have been through that has a very immediate impact on how we work and how we operate, both as producers and directors, is of course the Zoom fatigue that we all have experienced during this pandemic, and the ability to, of course, replicate some of the pitching structures and some of the market structures online. But I think we've also experienced this, that we all lost something. We lost this kind of informal exchange of understanding and market knowledge, and really understanding what are actually now the new expectations from broadcasters, from funders, these really informal exchanges. And I'm very curious to see how will that actually influence our productions from now on. How are this lack of informal exchange of information making us all think and act from now on? I think one immediate effect that I at least sensed was there was a lot of rescheduling at broadcasters, there was a lot of new strategies, but we didn't, as producers, really have access to it anymore because we didn't have that informal coffee and water cooler conversations with the broadcasters and with the financiers that we used to have. So I can really see it's now influencing a lot the next films that we are developing after Nelly and Nadine. And I think it's interesting conversation to also have at the town hall here. Do you feel the same? Because I can see now that this normal way of working where we were thinking more international and thinking more of developing projects with an international co-production aspect has a completely impact in terms of what are the projects we pick up now, what are the directors that we select to work with. So I think an interesting point to see and discuss now, but also I'm very curious to see where we will be in 2-3 years. Will we all have come back to a more national-based production, or will we still keep up that flow? I'm also very curious to hear from funders. What do you see coming into your funds? Do you still see the flow as it was before, or do you see a change in how people operate and organize? So the question is, of course, is it all bad? Has it been all a bad experience also with Nelly and Nadine and running a production company and stuff like that? Well, absolutely not. And I hope that some of you recognize that as well, that there has also been something very liberating and nice about the last year and a half. At least I've never spent so much time with my family as I did the last year and a half. Luckily, they are not here, so they cannot tell you whether that was good or bad. We will judge that on a different occasion. But I think something good also came from it, at least from my perspective. And I think as producers, we've been used to this almost kind of traveling circus where you had to travel around and pitch your project 4 or 5 times to get it financed. You had to be a lot of places, specifically because all the other producers were at many different places. So there was a little bit, of course, this game going on. And I must say, I felt for the last year and a half a certain relief from that actually all of a sudden it was possible to cut away a little bit all the noise and have much more focus on the actual work, actually producing and doing the films. And I hope that's really something good that we can bring with us. And I'm very curious to hear and discuss also your strategies in terms of producing and how do you feel that has been for the last year and a half. And then I'm also very, very curious to see how quickly will we go back. Because now we're here, and we all enjoy it. It's wonderful to see everybody again. But how quickly or how fast will we go back to how it was before? Are we all entering back into the traveling circus again? Do we have new strategies with us? Will we act differently? I'm very curious, because from a personal point of view, maybe I'm not so optimistic. I think very quickly we will maybe be back in how it was before. And I'm very curious also to see if you have changed your strategies. Will we actually travel less? Will we spend more time focusing on the productions that we are actually meant to do? So those were actually my kind of takeaways from doing Nelly and Nadine, and my discussion points that I think are very interesting to open up, because we are still, for me at least, very, very much in the middle of it. I think we only have seen the beginning, because the next, I think, 12, 24 months, I mean, the next period, we are also entering a completely different market space, right? We will see so many films being released, and I think we are also facing a challenge from that point of view, that it's an overflowing market. At the moment in Denmark, there are 6 films being released every week in cinemas, and we're seeing now this whole flow of productions being put on hold that now get into the market. So we're not over it yet, unfortunately. I think there's still a lot of things to deal with, and I think that's an interesting discussion to pick up. Where do we actually, how do we actually handle that as documentary filmmakers? So those were actually my discussion points coming from the work with Nelly and Nadine, and I should say that we are at the moment completing the film and hope that it will be premiering later this year, maybe beginning next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ove. So many questions that you brought up here, and really important issues, and I could see the people around me were nodding their heads. And we have like 20 minutes now, so we'll see how much we can answer right now. But I thought the way we'd start, in the spirit of collaboration, I would like to invite some of those who actually worked with Nelly and Nadine to talk a little, just very briefly, in terms of how a good collaboration works, what are the typical snags, and maybe also take the opportunity to answer Ove's questions when I come to broadcasters and funds. How do you deal with the situation right now? So Anita will be running around with a microphone. And I thought maybe we could start, starting with the funds. Clara Grunig, where are you? Clara, there you are, because Clara, you were at SFI at the time with Nelly and Nadine, so you were hands-on within this project. So just in a nutshell, how you work together, what you would highlight as the best practices we can move forward, and maybe end with a little about where you are right now at NFI and how you see your role in lifting the collaborations of the future.
Well, that's an easy question to answer. That's a lot of responsibility to lift what we're standing in right now. But I think Nelly and Nadine, as when I was was the funder, I think it was in a perfect place when I left the Swedish Film Institute, and it was just getting a lot of funding and positive feedback from all over, both broadcasters, international co-producers, etc. And it was right also before the pandemic. So when I left, then it was quiet for a long time. But I'm very happy to hear that you've worked on with it and are now in post-production. But as far as from a film fund perspective, I think, like you said, Ove, there has been a lot of challenges during this time. but also some good things. And I think one of the good things have been not only to be able to focus on the actual work, but also in terms of the connection and the access to those dialogues and those discussions that you have with the stakeholders. The democracy in that, and being able to have access, the same kind of access, whoever you are, even though I also think that if you do have a long track record in the tradition of the general forums and markets, it has been easier to get actual funding. But it had also been easier for those who haven't been in markets and that live far away from those places to get the same access. So I have, in my position, had connections with a lot of new people, which I think is very exciting, because that's exactly what we're aiming to work on going forward. Just like Simon was saying, looking at new perspectives and voices is the blood that we need into the market in order to continue. So yes, I have switched role. Now I'm in Norway, and I'm very lucky to have this perspective of having both the North American, but also now the Scandinavian, 3 Scandinavian perspectives. And I hope that that collaboration is going to continue to be some of the base for the stories that we want to tell. But we also need to share. We need to be able to share because we are lucky here. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. But one thing that you pointed out over that's been general, that the decision-making processes haven't gotten any quicker, and it's been more and more difficult to penetrate and understand what's going on. I thought we'd take a jump to SFI, where people at SFI now, who now we are in Sweden, we have Anna and Magdalena here. Anything you'd like to add in terms of how you see where SFI, your role in the community, but also what you can do to try to nourish and sustain the community right now?
You can share. I can try. Well, it's such a huge question, and yeah, a lot of important points have been raised already. And for me, I worked at SFI only during the pandemic, so I can only draw conclusions from what I've received, the kind of applications I received since, yeah, more or less exactly 1 year ago. And I guess that reflects a bit on what filmmakers think is possible to realize under the pandemic circumstances. So maybe that's a bit more of local stories. And I actually think that Jenny, my colleague, you have been working with the COVID support, and you have seen maybe more of the consequences for the ongoing productions that were hit by the...
Pass it on to Jenny. Do you want anything you want to add, Jenny?
Stand up also. No, but I think we're quite aware of the troubles that all the production companies have had in Sweden. And we had the opportunity to actually have a crisis package for the companies, for each and every, for the directors. So what we also have done, we have done for your project, as an example, if you really put the things that didn't work out for you, prolonging the projects, you could actually apply for the extra costs, and we would cover it 100%. And also, equally as important is actually to keep our production companies healthy. So we have, we usually have, once a year, we have a continuity support for the production companies. But now we have actually also made 2 other rounds of the continuity support for many, many more. I don't know how many, Magdalena, we reach, but 80 companies or something, so they can continue to do the development. And we know how important it is to be in development, which is actually in production when it comes to documentaries. So we try to see where the crisis money will do the best, I would say.
Yeah.
And we're not done yet. I mean, and we also of course gonna look and see what came out of it. But so far, we at least we could strengthen the companies.
Yeah. Because much of that foundation money is so crucial. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
Thank you. The third edge of the triangle were the broadcasters, and I can see we have the Swedish broadcasters way in the back, Charlotte and Axel. And I mean, while she's walking, I can say you mentioned that do we really need to pitch 4 times for a decision maker to make a decision? And actually, just yesterday when I was mentioning this to my daughter, she said, "Oh my God, you have a documentary industrial complex." And I said, "Can I quote you on that?" I wouldn't put it that far. But have we, in many ways, created a monster? Is my question. And Axel, I see you grabbed the mic. Go right ahead.
Is this on? Yeah. Was that inside SVT? 4 different people? No, can't have been. All right. Let me just say, it's so great to see you all in real life. You know, I almost get tears in my eyes because I thought you didn't exist anymore. So it's so good to see you. So let me just pick up a little bit of a different place maybe, because of course we are now not a broadcaster anymore. We are sort of a small local platform with 2 linear channels. That's what we are, basically. And we also feel the big, you know, corporate new documentary world, Simon. We see it, we feel it, and we try to survive. So in a way, I've been in this business for a long time, you know, from the big IDFA tables where, you know, commissioning editors were the kings of the universe, and they were looking and they were infighting, and all the producers and directors were looking at these elephants. And now it's the other way around. It's almost like we have to come to you to pitch ourselves. So let me do that a little. I know we've done many stupid things. I mean, we are too slow. We don't have enough money. We are guilty of so much, but we're really trying, right? And we probably have spent too much money on big American, you know, profit-driven films. I don't think we should do that. But we are so desperate to be relevant for our audience. So we take a chunk of our money and we buy those films too. And maybe that's money that would be better in this community than in that community, because our little chunk of money in that super billion-dollar film is not important at all. You know? So we've been trying to build coalitions, and we're thinking and we're rethinking about how we should do our business, because clearly we have to stop chasing American films. You know, we can buy them, but we shouldn't take so much money. So I would like to take this opportunity to pitch us, the public service sector, to you guys. And Simon is right. What we are doing at the moment, we're not clear in any way, but we're trying to rebuild what public service really means in a digital surrounding. What is public service values in this big digital world? I think it's about values. I think it's about democracy. I think it's about, you know, Goliath and David and things like that. So we are working on our system. We are working on our public service values. We are building new coalitions. We are trying to get faster. And let me speak 2 seconds about that. So we are now building a sort of a pan-Nordic group of commissioning editors. We know each other and we try to pool our resources. And we want to speak to you, not when you have your program already, but before. So talk to us about what you want to do. It's like, what are the good things? Because in return for us becoming more open and better in all ways, hopefully, we will also need you to understand our world. We need to be relevant. We need to have the eyes of the audience. I mean, I go to conferences every day about, you know, what segment of the audience does this documentary take, and that segment, and that segment. To be truthful, I don't know. I have no clue, but I'm trying to, and I'm supposed to know these things. So this is very important. And I will stop, but I'm also, as many of you know, I'm working in the EBU surrounding, and the EBU documentary group has the same problem. So we are now trying to build a bigger coalition. So in 2 weeks, there'll be a conference, a workshop, where we are coming together to build a new way, a new model of co-financing of films, and to do it as a fast track. So it will be faster to development money, faster to production money, hopefully. And there is a chunk of money inside the EBU system that I'm trying to get my hands on. It's a lot, and I have to finish now. But Nelly and Nadine looks beautiful, and you know, it's going to be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Axel. Thank you. So talking about fast tracks, I'm just stay within the Nordics for a minute, because I mean, Nordisk Film and TV Fond, where I'm from in particular, but generally really rely on the Nordic collaboration, and broadcasters have been key in so many ways. And actually we have Jenny Vestergaard from Yle, and the Nordic remit has been part of your brief for as long as I can remember, and I think Anita's coming with the microphone now. So if you could talk a little bit about how you see this Nordic collaboration, and how can we maybe fast track that a little bit also, given the situation for our filmmakers today. Over to you, Jenny. YLE, Finland.
Thank you. Should I stand up? Okay. Well, I'm the small player in one sense, and I was the small player in this, and I can pick up a little bit on what Clara actually already said. In a way, it's easy when you know, and I've been around quite a while, so I think all the producers and production companies I knew from before. It was quite easy, and I knew what all of you were struggling with, and we actually as broadcasters saw a big increase in watching actually during the pandemic, so we actually needed a lot of films because everybody was staying at home and watching more and more films. The problem was, of course, that we wanted the films now. So what can you do when a lot of your productions are just delayed and delayed and delayed, and you have a pandemic audience sitting at home and wanting new films? Well, I can say one thing we did, because we couldn't actually ask the film funds, which I think is very good, start new projects and start developing, because that doesn't really solve the problems for us. So we actually had, during this last year, put up a classic series. So we actually contacted a lot of the production companies to dig their archives, and that was quite successful. So we kind of, another way of spending the money, bringing a lot of classics. So we had 20 classics in the spring, we will have 20 in the fall now. So that's one way, of course, that we can support the industry. And what else can I say? Nelly and Nadine is the kind of films I produce. I don't do celebrities and true crime. I don't even watch it, so well, maybe some celebrities sometimes, yes. But I don't do those films. So Nelly and Nadine was this kind of, you fall in love with the project from the beginning. So I was just happy to be there. And since we know each other from far way behind, yeah, too long, very long, it was just a pleasure. I'm looking forward to get the rough cut. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. You know, time is running, and we know we will by no means exhaust these issues, but I want to open, any spontaneous producer, other professional want to chime in? Just raise your hand. Anita will be there in a second. But while you are contemplating this, I will actually go to the Norwegian co-producer. From up front, we have Ingrid here with us, Ingrid Aunefalk, in terms of Nelly Nadine in particular, but also in general, from your perspective up in Trondheim. Talk about, again, the local and global, working from Trondheim internationally. What are the important issues to you right now?
Well, we had 2 co-productions in productions during 2020, and Nelly and Nadine being one of them. And you said, Ove, learning new ways to work. I have 2 things to say about that. We've learned how to become green in our work, and I really hope that from that perspective too, we can learn something in this industry, because the way we learn to work is very green. And also, none of this would have worked if we didn't know each other. So I'm happy that we have film institutes that support long-term collaborations between producers. It's for us up north film, it's Napa Films in Finland, and Auto Images. We have collaborated on several projects. And I want to, I don't know the English word, velvilje, from the Norwegian Film Institute and the Swedish, that you can see that we are aiming for a big collaboration, and also with the broadcasters, that you trust us. Because with none of the productions, nothing would have been possible in COVID if we didn't have your trust. So I think that was my main.
Thank you. And even though it was extremely important, and that's this particular situation, of course, it's not any less as we move forward, where we have the aftermath, so to speak. I mean, keep the conversation going, but now it's time to go over to distribution. But thank you to Ove for sharing, and Magnus, who's here, thank you for a marvelous film. Now over to distribution. Where is the audience? Indeed. Another key finding of Nordisk Film and TV Fund's distribution report that distribution was/is still very much reliant on conventional window models. And the online distribution strategies were somewhat random, as were the outcomes. It also appeared that online success seemed to rely on conventional window marketing, especially cinema press coverage, with all that this entails. So maybe we're not in so much an either-or situation as an all-inclusive. We have asked Finnish producer Mia Haavisto to share her experience with the runaway hit Lost Boys in competition here at Nordisk Panorama, and actually you can see it tonight at Panora 2 if you're so inclined after we see the clip. Mia has in many ways gone full circle. We met way back in the day when you were a documentary producer, then you took a couple of years at the Finnish Film Foundation as a consultant, then produced big budget films like Tom of Finland and Unknown Soldier, just to name a few, huge hits in Finland if you don't know, and even a TV series. And now she's gone full circle and is back with yet another documentary and has survived to tell the tale. So, Mia, will you please share? Welcome, welcome, Mia.
I started by dropping the mic.
Use that one.
Let's see if it works like this. Thank you for the wonderful invitation to be here. And as I've been asked to talk about distribution of my film, I think we'll start by watching the trailer. And I think the film was released during the pandemic, and like you said, it was a surprise hit against all odds. I spent the last 8 years, before the premiere, I worked for 8 years on this film, and the filmmakers even longer, for 10 years. So I wasn't quite sure whether the film would ever be completed, but it was. So let's watch the trailer so you get an idea of what it's about.
Nyt vedetään 1000 milliä ja katsotaan mitä se sanoo. Vai sanooko yhtään mitään, ja jos sanoo hyvin, niin vittu kiitos Jumalalle ja Ankelotin temppeleille ja...
Mulla on päivät ihan sun kasvisuuskamppitsesta.
You know what happened? Can you speak English? Toi kuulostaa ihan hullulta.
Niin, eli se pääsen.
Remember that Finnish guy? Himself? The guy got shot.
The girl can tell the robber and make the plan for kill.
If you don't want to play game, you not come to Cambodia.
Making reference to what Simon said, it's about highly marginalized people made from within. So it was the fourth biggest Finnish documentary of all times in cinemas. It reached an audience of 73,000 tickets sold, which was big, especially in COVID times. We had to stop the run in mid-distribution because the theaters closed down, but we were very happy with the end result. All the other major hits in Finnish cinema have been about nature. There have been nature documentaries and a documentary about a hockey player in NHL. So seeing a film like this performing so well in theaters was a huge surprise to everyone. As I said, I wasn't sure whether the film would be completed. We had really patient financiers with us. The film was delayed by more than 3 years, and it was just, what would the result or the reason for that be? It's just like with filmmakers who work within this world, they are not doing 9 to 5 days, and they are really, it's hard to get a schedule to work with them. And I even said when the financiers were asking me when the film will be completed, at some point I just said that I don't know. I'm not sure whether it will ever be completed. And this is one reason why it's a domestically financed film. It's because at some point I said to myself that I wouldn't want to engage new financiers to the film and maybe let them down. So we settled with a very small budget of 300,000 euros with this film and made it work. It's a sequel, like you said in the trailer, it's a sequel to a rather famous film, at least in Finland, called Reindeer Spotting: Escape from Centerland. That was released in 2011. And that film also got really good result in theaters, less than we did with Lost Boys, but still it was noteworthy with 63,000 admissions. I'm going to speak a lot about figures, I hope you don't mind, but as the angle is distribution here. It's by the same creatives, but by another production company and by another distributor. All the time we were a bit worried as to how to make a film that's actually an independent sequel, that it doesn't require for the audience to know the first film by heart, because there are the same characters in both these films. And I think in the end we did manage to do that. What happened is that a lot of people wanted to see the first film. It really it got really good admissions in VOD services, the first film did, before we released the second film. And there are loads of YouTube, pirated copies of the first film also. And so people did want to see that again before we released the part 2. So it's a very small budget film, and the end result, we did a good profit on the film to our surprise, so it has made a bit more than the production budget by now, so around 300,000 euros. And when we started the project, I was still working in another company called Helsinki Filmi, which I then left 4 years ago, and so we ended up doing this production together. Helsinki Filmi as the delegate producer, and my own company, Tekele Production, as a co-producer. As to the distribution strategy, we had decided from day one that this would be a film for the big screen. We wanted the visual quality to reflect that and to be impressive on the big screen. Of course, the original footage we worked on is rather raw. They use consumer cameras mostly to work on that material, so we knew that it was what it would be, and there wouldn't be much to do about that. But there was other kind of materials that was captured later or taken later on to make it even more complex visually. In an effort to do proper distribution in cinemas, we knew that we would be working with a big distributor, and we chose to work with SF Studios. And as I was unsure whether the film would ever be there, I didn't make an agreement with SF until 18 months before the release date. And even then, I didn't want to take an MG because I still wasn't there whether it would happen. We had a campaign, like for any fiction feature film, for this film, a campaign lasting around 3 months. And we had a really sort of a limited press strategy until then. For example, I got repeated questions about when would the sequel be out. And I always said that I don't know, which was truthful in fact. But we didn't get any information about the film until we actually could release the trailer you just saw, and to tell that the premiere date would be September 25th. And with that, we started That was the only piece of information we gave. And as with the interviews with the film director, we didn't give any until very close to the premiere. And I have really good experience of a press strategy that's really limited, because my experience is that the audience easily thinks that the film is out there if they read an article about the director or something. So I try to have all the press coverage as close to the premiere as possible, or even after that, to get maximum attention for the press. Because the resources we have for marketing, documentaries especially, is so limited that we need all the attention we can get from the press. We have had a reasonable marketing budget. It was 60,000 euros, so it equals to an art house film distribution or marketing budget in Finland. I don't know how it is in other Nordic countries. As we read in your report, it's just pathetic how small Finnish budgets are compared to Danish or Swedish budget. I'm just dead jealous, or I was jealous when I read the report. Anyway, so we were very sensitive about the COVID-19 restrictions, trying to be sure that the premiere we set for the film in late September would be optimal. And it turned out that it was. We managed to make almost all the admissions before the theatres closed down again. We knew early on that we would be dealing with an X-rated film. I don't know if you've seen the film, any of you, but there's explicit sexual images in the film and drug use, quite a bit of that. And we knew that the previous film it was an X-rated film, and we knew this one would be too. But we tried to also use it as a marketing tool, that even before we had the actual K-18, meaning for adult audiences only, we put it already in the trailer. We put it already in the poster that it would be that, in order to inform the audience so the teenagers wouldn't be disappointed, but to also give an indication that this is something interesting that you will be seeing. And some journalists approached us asking, like, how can you do it? Because you actually don't know. But we said that we know. But it worked for the benefit of the film, really. We were working so hard for the domestic premiere that we sort of ignored the international premiere. It was hard enough to try to time the film to the domestic audiences that we just thought that hopefully there's an international festival that likes the film and takes it, and we can't worry about it right now, that we are going to have the world premiere in Finland in theatres. And we did open in Copenhagen Docks, which was nice. As to the marketing, our primary target group were young adults, so people over 18. And the secondary target group was people over 30 who would have seen the previous film when they were in a sensitive age to appreciate that kind of content. And knowing that we are working with a younger audience, we put a lot of emphasis on social media, which we thought would work well. And then the SF Studios suggested that we do a TV campaign. I thought that was the most stupid thing I've heard, because the audience would be on social media, but they insisted on having a TV campaign for the film, which they did. And they had a campaign on a TV slot of a commercial channel. And it worked beautifully, because we really reached the film buffs through that campaign. It wasn't terribly expensive, because nobody was buying commercial time during COVID. So we got a really good exposure for people seeking high-quality films. So I would not have known that, but luckily they are the experts, and they knew better. The trailer, when it was released in July, so around 10 weeks before the premiere, it went viral. So we knew instantly that we would have the young audience knows about the film. And so we were even more sure that we would be targeting our marketing to that group. We had a really provocative poster, a black and red poster with a crane. Is that, yeah, with a crane and a map of Southeast Asia and a syringe in the poster, and that really caught the attention, although also in social media platforms. We had beautiful photos by the cinematographer and protagonist that we used a lot on social media, and having quotations of the film also. We were struggling a bit as to how to communicate that it's a serious film about a serious issue, and we didn't want to use funny bits of the film, for example, in the social media channels. We didn't want to make it too ha 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 film, even if there are scenes that are funny to watch in the actual film. But there was like a bit of a moral issue with us when doing the marketing campaign. It was sensitive at times. Like I said, the financing we had for marketing was limited, so we were really aware of the need of having good press for the film. We had a lot of interest from journalists for the protagonist, Jonas Neuvonen, who was also the director, who wanted to do interviews with him. And we had the press, the publicist, who also works a lot with fiction films and actors and all that, is very experienced in setting up interviews with the best news outlets. She organized all the interviews, but what happened is that the director vanished. So he was not to be reached when it was time for the interviews to take place. So we had to cancel all interviews and hope for him to re-emerge at some point. And he did. He did re-emerge. He had gone on a trip. And he re-emerged, and he had very good internet connections, and he gave beautiful interviews to all those journalists who were even more eager than before to have the interviews. So I think, like, had I been a really good producer, I would have thought about this kind of an act to do. But I wasn't. I was just really worried and not sleeping a lot at night when he was nowhere around. But then the interviews were really good, and we got excellent coverage in newspapers. And it somehow went very well along with the themes of the films and the mysterious nature of the film, him vanishing. And he didn't want to be in television. He didn't want to have any articles with his face in any images, so it was just meetings between journalists and him, and then the news articles. So in everything that we did, we wanted to do like we would do in a fiction film. We had a wonderful electronic press kit that explained all about the first part and necessary things about the second part, and gave all the information possible, also doing the moral justification as to why we are making a film about drug use and sex tourism. So we tried to somehow preempt some of the questions that we were expecting to get. We had a whole battery of answers, together with Wiley, if I may say so, to possible crisis management questions that we were expecting to get, especially related to sex workers in Southeast Asia. But we didn't receive those questions. When the film came out, it got really good reviews, and people seemed to be at awe about that the quality of the film was so much better than for the first film. And so we didn't really receive any difficult questions, which I'm still wondering about, but we didn't. Yes. Then because the film did so well during the first weekend, we decided to put a bit more money to the campaigning, to have it like a sustaining campaign to get even more admissions. And then we were really busy in having a home entertainment window used. And we knew we only had like 10 weeks before Wiley would be screening the film, and we had to make the most of that. I probably don't have time to go into any figures with that, but the launch in theaters worked very well for VOD. The thing is that because it's X-rated content, we could only have it in electronic sell-through and TVOD platform, not on SVOD platforms at all, as people needed to subscribe to be sort of adults to see the film. But the film sold 7,000 times on EST for around 15 euros, and then it was rented around 27,000 times for around 5 euros. So in total, the revenue of that was substantial. And like somebody said here, people were on their tellies buying content en masse. And we also sold 3,000 DVDs, which was a surprise. But the theatrical success did everything for the success in home entertainment. We would not have had the resources to do any proper publicity for that. Wiley did screen the film, and it got 200,000 viewers in linear broadcasting, which was good, and there was a theme discussion with researchers about drug use and crime in television in connection with that, which worked really well. And then it was put on Arena platform, where it acquired over 500,000 views, or startings, or how do you say that, before it was taken down, because even if we had made a different version for YLE with less sexual, explicit imagery and drug use, they still put the age limit to 18, and then it couldn't be on a free VOD. But it was surprisingly, YLE was still very happy with the outcome, and now they are showing it at late hour in linear television because anything else is impossible. My conclusions: there is an audience, there's definitely an audience, but the audience need to know about the film. It needs to know that it's in theaters now, and it's possible to buy a ticket for it. And they need to lure into wanting to see it. With documentaries, it often happens that people are made to think that they have to see it, something, that it's their duty as citizens to see something. And we wanted to avoid anything like that in our marketing campaign, that it's a privilege to see it rather than a duty as a citizen. Then the limited press strategy, I talked about that. Then, sorry to say, but we avoided using the word documentary in any connection whatsoever. And we all the time talked simply about a film, thinking that people would then find it more appealing. I'm a cinema lover, I have a background as a documentary director, but I would still avoid the word when talking with mainstream audience. We try to encourage people to form their own opinion about our film and not to ever offer any truth about what it is that we wanted to make the film about. Thank you, sorry for being over time.
Thank you, Mia. Stick around, stick around. Oh, thank you. So old world meets new world in many ways in terms of, you know, it's good old cinema, even DVD in the mix, and a TV campaign that makes a difference even when we venture into the online platforms. Thank you for that. As in the previous case, I was planning on bringing in stakeholders, but Erkko unfortunately had to excuse himself, but you covered the television collaboration, that even though it was tricky material, even though you had different platforms to juggle, you did manage to make all ends meet. I don't know if Esther van Messel, have you made it? No, she's on her way from the airport. She wasn't sure she was going to make it, but she is the international distributor of your film. So we'll have to talk with her at the water cooler about how it's been going these days. But instead, during this Q&A, I thought I'd bring in some more voices. And if I understand correctly, I don't know if do we have Christian Falk in Zoom? No, we don't. Okay, we'll skip that then. Because Christian Falk, we had him in our previous session, that he, with his film I, Human, literally was in the cinema for the premiere when Norway locked down, and they had to immediately start not only plan B, but plan C in the midst. But check that session out and check their interview out with us. But of course, any spontaneous questions, go ahead, but I thought this could maybe be a best practices also session. So I thought I'd jump over to you, Carsten Aronsson, because I was a couple of weeks ago when I had my very first physical experience in Haugesund. I could see your new film, Young and Afraid. There you go. Nattbarna. And amazing film, you need to check it out. You know how to pick them, Carsten, I told you already. But the reason I'm bringing you in is you mentioned that TikTok had played a really important role in finding young new audiences. So I thought, share with your colleagues.
Hello.
How did you do it?
Yeah.
Stand up, please.
All right. Okay, if I have to. Yeah. No, I don't really know if TikTok is going to be a success for us or not. But at least in numbers, it was baffling. In a week, it had a sequence that we released on TikTok. I've never had TikTok myself, so I had no idea what kind of impact it could have. But 400,000 people saw that first sequence, which was kind of a clip with one of the main protagonists in the film, Petter. And by now, I think that was about 3, maybe 4 weeks ago now, and by now it's almost doubled, over 700,000 people who've seen it. I mean, this will be very interesting. We don't really know the result of that because the film will be out now in a week, 24th of September, so almost a year after Lost Boys. So that will be very, very interesting to see what happens in the theaters in Norway if we actually get the target audience of years 16 to 24 to actually go and see it. But they're traveling around, and our campaign is also approximately 3 months before the release and then a couple of months into the release, so about 5 months effectively. Yeah, thank you.
Thank Thank you. So we'll have to invite you back next year, Carsten, to see how it went.
I'm ready.
Good luck. Anybody else who wants to share or kick anything in? Because I thought maybe some of the sales agents around, I was thinking, but no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come to you, Gita, if that's okay. Because Gita, you have such a vast background in international distribution, and you are Nordic in your very bones. So having listened to me or generally in taking stock of the situation right now, what would your reaction be? Please stand up.
Yeah. First, Mia, congratulations with this. It's amazing. It reminds me when I watched this film about Christiane F. I was from that generation and I never forgot it. And I hope your audience will never forget this film as I never forgot Christiane F. So very impressive what you did. And Christian is not here, but I actually heard what he said in this panel. And it impressed me a lot. I mean, he was, sorry, I'm repeating what he said, right? He was sitting in a cinema with 700 people for the premiere of I, Human when the country was closed down. And his distributor very quickly called all the VOD, you tell me if I say something wrong now, called all the VOD platforms in Norway very quickly. The great distributor organized the film, got available online, and it was a big success. And then he says, I'm not sure if it would have been that without the press and the campaign as for a cinema release. And it just stayed with me because, I mean, someone missing today is exactly the press, the film critics, those that is helping us to make people watch our films. You said it, Simon, it was never easy to make people watch a documentary. I mean, as a school kid, my generation, oh my God. My brother still says, I work with problem films, right? Who wants to see a problem film? That's also, I guess, I mean, when I used to work as a sales agent for many, many years, I don't do that anymore since half a year. No, and I forgot what I wanted to say about it, but it's public service broadcasters was the main partner to show our films. More than 90% of the income of the sale of a film would come from public service broadcaster. During those 18 years I worked as a sales agent, it got really more and more difficult to get the films we wanted to work with, great documentaries, even on public service. Now with the new partners, you mentioned it also, new opportunities, but they have of course the problem how to make people watch the films, and I guess that's why it's very special kind of films that are great success. Good for them. I mean, but we can't just talk about those few films that go to Sundance and make the big deals of Netflix. The documentary films is about all the other films we want to find audience for, right? So public service, please, please, please think not only of what the audience want to see, whoever decides that. Think about the filmmakers out there. They are the one with the stories. They are the one with the talent to create something. Look at that and follow that line as a public service institution, public service broadcaster. It's a wish for a sales agent's point of view. So that's for me.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you, Gita. Carsten Arnoldsen. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Do you mind using my mic?
No, it's good. If I can just add something briefly to what you just said, I think like the creatives are doing a lot connected to packaging films. They are doing a lot connected to marketing the films. They are making the posters. They are making the trailers. I'm the producer here, but I strongly think that it's up to the producer and the distributor to do all the marketing materials and to improve the film so that the audience will actually find it. So I will say this early on to all directors I work with, that you focus on directing your masterpiece and the other people will focus on getting it to the audience. And I think this helps a lot.
Thank you. We're really running out of time. They'll soon throw us out of here. But we want these conversations to continue, so you'll have interesting dinners later, I'm sure. Carsten, you asked to have a word again, and then I'm going to wrap up with Jan Do afterwards.
I'll be very quick. I just wanted to pick up on what you said, Gitte, and also what Simon said in the beginning, because it's like, this is like a heartfelt thought that I have, that not only are we really dependent on the public service channels, and they need to know that, and they do, but still, we are very dependent on the film institutes. And the film institutes, on this occasion, we need to talk about the co-production money, because it's not enough. We need to bring it up more centrally in each of the film institutes in the Nordics, to make them actually put even more money into the co-productions in the between the Scandinavian production companies, because this is because we see it in the NFI that, you know, they're so commercially organized these days, saying bring in more money from the international distribution, because then every kroner, Norwegian kroner, is worth more from the Film Institute. But it's like, yeah, sure, but I mean, we have a very great symbiosis in the Scandinavian countries, and we need to take care of that. We can't reduce the co-production money from the film institutes. This is very, very, very important, and I know this is, of course, is important to you. But it's, you know, from yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely, Carsten. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I can tell we're just warming up. We should have another hour, but we don't. So now I've asked Jan Do, who wrote our report earlier this year, or the years before, to maybe wrap up with a few words, your observations and any recommendations from your side?
Well, I guess what we have heard today only confirms what we talked about when we were working on the report. So many things are happening in the industry at the moment. So I can only really encourage the whole industry to keep being open and share all your experiences, and hopefully maybe we could see Nordisk Film TV Fond continue making this kind of reports an annual thing, maybe at this town hall meeting. I know the fiction side already has something like this with the Nostradamus report, which I think also Nordisk Film TV Fond backs. Because there are so many different things that is going on right now. I mean, one thing is difficulties financing documentaries and the complexity of that. The other thing is the COVID situation and the aftermath of that, as we have already seen. And what we can really learn from is getting more data and getting more background information about all this. So I can only encourage everybody to share their information, continue to share their information. I think the industry is quite good at, or the community is quite good at doing that already, but it can always be better, especially as Axel was trying to pitch the broadcasters. I think it's very important for all parties in the community and the industry to try to learn about the situations that the other collaborators are in, because it's not necessarily easy being a broadcaster with the situation going on. You have to be competitive. You have to think about your audiences and numbers in audiences. And how do you do that? Maybe you go more commercial. That is one solution. And as well, how does the theatrical releases, how do they work? What are the situations that the cinemas are facing? Where the audience is going when they are going to the VOD platforms? So all of this information can only help us all. So share, and hopefully Nordisk Film TV Fond can pick up the data somewhere and make a new report.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for your work, and thank you for everyone who contributed to the report that we made. And I'd say, yes, the more we know, the more we share, the more we can live together. So I'm thrilled that Anita and Nordisk Panorama will be continuing this annual event. But hey, we have 365 days ahead of us, so it's not about waiting till next year to continue the conversation. We rely on you. We can ask the questions, but we rely on you to continue the conversations and to make change together. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Ove. Thank you, Mia. And thank you to Anita and the Nordisk Panorama crew and everyone who made this happen. And thank you. And I promise next year, a bigger room and more mics. So thank you so much, everyone.